They mocked the millionaire for bringing his assistant, then she walked in like a queen. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. It was a stormy Friday night in New York City. The glass windows of Hale Tower glowed against the dark skyline, reflecting the city's restless lights. Inside the top floor office, Alexander Hale, the youngest self-made billionaire on Wall Street, sat behind a mahogany desk surrounded by silence. The rain tapped against the glass like a metronome of loneliness. On the desk lay a single envelope trimmed with gold, an invitation to the annual Empire Gala. The note inside read, "Attendance required. Bring a partner." Alexander let out a short laugh that never reached his eyes. Bring a partner. The board wanted him to show up smiling, pretending that the messy divorce and the tabloid scandals had not dented his empire. He loosened his tie, staring at the skyline where lightning flashed over the Hudson. For a man who could buy anything, he had somehow lost the only thing that mattered, peace. A knock interrupted his thoughts. The glass door slid open and Clara Nguyen, his executive assistant, stepped in with a folder pressed to her chest. She was wearing her usual plain blouse and black skirt, her hair tied neatly back, her tone calm but soft. "Mr. Hale," she said, "the investor reports are ready for your signature." He nodded, barely glancing up, then his eyes caught the time glowing on the corner of his monitor, 7:12 p.m., the night before the gala. Everyone in his circle would be there, former colleagues, rivals, his ex-wife, and all the vultures who had waited a year to laugh at his fall. He looked at Clara again. She was quietly organizing files on the credenza, unaware of his gaze. Dependable, smart, uncomplicated, everything the people at that ballroom were not. "Clara," he said suddenly. She turned, surprised. "Yes, Mr. Hale?" He hesitated for half a breath, then spoke. "Do you have plans tomorrow night?" She blinked. "Tomorrow? Not really, sir. Why?" He leaned back in his chair, the city's neon bleeding across the window behind him. "There is an event I need to attend. It would be easier if I did not go alone." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "You mean, as your assistant?" "No," he said slowly. "As my date." Silence filled the room. Clara froze, folder still in her hands. "Mr. Hale, that would not be appropriate." "I am not asking for anything inappropriate," he replied evenly. "Just 3 hours at the gala. Then we go back to normal. I need someone I can trust. Someone who will not make a spectacle out of it." Clara exhaled, unsure if he was serious. "I do not have a dress for something like that." "I will take care of it," he said, already turning to his phone. "Consider it part of your overtime." Her heart beat faster. The Empire Gala was where New York's elite gathered, bankers, fashion icons, media magnates. She had only seen it in magazines, never imagined walking into it. "Why me?" she asked finally. Alexander looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Because you are the only person here who still talks to me like I am human." Clara swallowed hard. "If that is what you really want, then I will go." He nodded once, businesslike, though something in his eyes softened. "Good, be ready by 7. The driver will pick you up." As she turned to leave, her reflection lingered faintly in the glass behind him, small, quiet, almost invisible against the storm outside. When the door closed, Alexander stared again at the invitation on his desk. Outside, thunder rolled through the city like applause for a performance that had not yet begun. Tomorrow night, they would all be watching. And they would laugh, until she walked in. The next evening arrived faster than Clara expected. The city glittered under the golden haze of early evening traffic, and the windows of Hale Tower reflected the lights like molten glass. In a private dressing suite on the 40th floor, Clara stood frozen before a mirror, staring at the woman staring back. The gown had been delivered that morning, midnight blue silk that caught the light with every breath. A stylist, hired by Mr. Hale, had spent hours curling her dark hair into soft waves. Diamond studs glimmered at her ears, and a delicate bracelet circled her wrist. She barely recognized herself. The door opened with a quiet click. Alexander stepped in, wearing a black tuxedo that fit like it had been made for the very idea of power. For a moment, he stopped. The air between them seemed to still. You look, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Perfect. Clara blushed, lowering her gaze. It is the dress, she said softly. He smiled faintly. No, it is you. The elevator ride down was silent except for the hum of the city below. Clara clutched a small silver clutch, rehearsing the rules he had given her. Stay close. Speak only if spoken to. And most importantly, remember that it is only for tonight. Outside, the black limousine waited. As they stepped in, flashbulbs flickered from across the street. Even from a distance, reporters were already guessing who the mysterious woman beside the reclusive CEO might be. Inside the car, the tension thickened. Clara looked out the window, watching the skyline blur by. You really do not have to do this, she said quietly. I do, Alexander replied. The board expects a display of stability. By bringing your assistant? He glanced at her reflection in the window. By bringing someone I can trust. The limousine stopped in front of the Plaza Hotel, where chandeliers glowed behind glass doors and a red carpet stretched across marble steps. Dozens of photographers turned at once, cameras flashing like lightning. The chauffeur opened the door. Alexander stepped out first, then, extending his hand toward her, he said softly, Ready? Clara took his hand. The crowd's laughter swelled when they recognized her plain features. Her hesitant steps. She could hear the whispers. His assistant? Is he serious? Alexander heard them too. He tightened his grip on her hand, guiding her forward with calm confidence. Every eye followed them through the glittering hallway, into the ballroom drenched in gold light and polished crystal. Music from a live orchestra filled the air. Waiters moved gracefully between tables. Familiar faces turned to greet Alexander, some with polite smiles, others with thinly veiled amusement. Alexander Hale, one man called out. It has been a while. And who is this lovely companion? Clara Nguyen, Alexander said without hesitation. My partner for the evening. The word partner hung in the air. The man's grin faltered. Clara offered a polite nod, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. At the table reserved for Hale Industries, she noticed his ex-wife among the guests, dressed in red, her laughter sharp as glass. She leaned toward another guest and whispered something behind her champagne flute. More laughter rippled through the group. Clara's throat tightened, but she kept her posture straight. Alexander noticed. Ignore them, he murmured. They only see what they want to see. Then came the part she had dreaded, the introductions on stage. The host announced the evening's highlight, a short panel on ethical leadership in modern business. Clara froze when she saw Alexander's name on the list. He rose and adjusted his cufflinks. Join me, he whispered. What? No, I cannot. You can, he said simply. They walked together toward the stage. The lights were blinding. Alexander spoke first, calm and composed, but when the host invited Clara to share a perspective from someone close to leadership, every head turned toward her. Her voice trembled at first. I am not a leader, she began, but I have worked for one, and I have learned that integrity is not about titles. It is about standing beside someone even when it is unpopular to do so. A hush spread through the ballroom. Cameras clicked. Even his ex-wife lowered her glass. When they stepped down, Alexander's voice was low but warm. You handled that perfectly. I just spoke the truth, she said. Exactly, he replied. That is what they fear most. Hours later, as the gala wound down, Alexander offered to drive her home. The night air outside was cool, the city still glowing. They stood beside the limousine, silence stretching between them. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For reminding me what decency looks like. She smiled faintly. Good night, Mr. Hale. Good night, Clara. As she stepped into the car, she caught his reflection in the window, no longer the lonely man in the tower, but someone rediscovering what it meant to be human. And for the first time in a long while, Alexander Hale felt something he had almost forgotten, hope. The following morning, the headlines spread faster than the sunrise over Manhattan. Every major news outlet carried the same photograph, Alexander Hale entering the plaza with a mysterious woman in blue. Hand in hand, cameras flashing like fireworks. Hale's new flame, one headline shouted. From boardroom to ballroom. Who is she? Another teased. In the Hale Tower lobby, Clara tried to keep her head down as she passed the reception desk. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages from coworkers, screenshots, gossip, speculation. By the time she reached her floor, her stomach had turned to knots. When she stepped into Alexander's office, he was already standing by the window, the city glowing behind him. The morning light caught the sharp edge of his jaw and the faint shadow of fatigue under his eyes. "They're having fun," he said without turning. "Apparently, you are now my fiancée, my secret wife, and my public scandal, all in one night." Clara winced. "I am sorry, I did not expect the press to be there." He turned then, his expression unreadable. "Do not apologize, you did nothing wrong." He walked over to his desk, picking up a glossy magazine that displayed their photograph on the front page. The caption read, "The Billionaire and the Mystery Woman Who Stole the Spotlight." "They have been waiting for a story like this," he said quietly, "something to distract them from their own emptiness." She folded her arms, uneasy. "Does it hurt your reputation?" Alexander exhaled slowly. "It should not, but perception is everything in this city. The board called this morning. They are concerned about what they call a lack of professionalism." Clara bit her lip. "Maybe I should resign, before it gets worse." He looked at her sharply. "No, you are not leaving because of their gossip." "But they will not stop," she said softly. "You know that." He stared at her, the mask of composure faltering for just a second. "Let them talk. They have taken enough from me already. They will not take this too." Clara hesitated. The intensity in his voice sent a ripple through her chest. She wanted to believe him, but she knew how brutal his world could be. Hours later, the situation grew worse. An email leaked from a rival firm suggesting that Alexander's appearance with his assistant was part of a ploy to manipulate shareholders. The market dipped, and reporters gathered outside the tower, shouting questions as he walked to his car. By afternoon, the pressure was unbearable. Clara found him still in his office, the blinds drawn, the air thick with silence. "Mr. Hale," she said quietly, "this is getting out of control. The foundation sponsors are pulling out. The PR team is panicking." He did not look up from the papers on his desk. "I can handle it." "You should not have to handle it alone," she said. Finally, he lifted his eyes to hers. Tired but steady. "I have been alone for a very long time, Clara. I am used to it." Something in her broke at those words. "Maybe you should not be." For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows, carrying the faint hum of the city below. That night, Clara went home and stared at her reflection in the mirror, the same woman who, 24 hours earlier, had walked into a ballroom full of strangers and stood beside a man everyone wanted to tear down. She thought of the look in his eyes when he said her name, the quiet gratitude in his voice. When her phone rang, she almost did not answer. "Clara," his voice said on the other end, low and rough, "the board has called an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. They want a statement from you. About us." Her heart stopped. "What do you want me to say?" There was a pause. Then his voice softened. "Tell them the truth, whatever that means for you." When the call ended, she sat in silence, her heart racing. The truth. But what was the truth anymore? She had agreed to be his fake date for one night. But now, as the rain began to fall again against her window, Clara realized the truth was no longer something she could easily define. Because somewhere between the boardroom and the ballroom, between polite distance and whispered honesty, something real had begun to take root. And neither of them could pretend it was fake anymore. The next morning, the boardroom on the top floor of Hale Tower felt colder than usual. Glass walls framed the skyline, but the light that poured in was harsh, sterile, and judgmental. At the long mahogany table sat 12 board members, their tailored suits and quiet murmurs filling the space with restrained tension. Alexander entered without ceremony. His expression was calm, but his posture carried a weight that silence could not hide. Behind him, Clara followed, clutching a slim folder to her chest. Her steps were steady, though her pulse thundered in her ears. "Mr. Hale," said Mr. Whitmore, the oldest board member, "we appreciate your punctuality. We will be brief." Alexander took his seat. "By all means," he said evenly. Whitmore adjusted his glasses. "Your appearance at the Empire Gala last night has caused unnecessary attention. The press is speculating about your relationship with an employee. Investors are calling this a distraction." "I see," Alexander said quietly. Another board member, a woman named Clara Nguyen, leaned forward. "This company's reputation depends on discipline. We suggest a formal clarification, a public statement. Preferably, from both of you. Clara's throat tightened. A statement? Yes, Whitmore said. Something simple. That the event was a misunderstanding. That there is nothing personal between you and Mr. Hale. Alexander's jaw flexed. And if I refuse? Then we will convene a vote of confidence. Whitmore said. We cannot afford instability, not with the merger approaching. The words landed like a blade. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the city below. Alexander turned toward Clara, his gaze softening. You do not have to say anything, he murmured. But she shook her head slowly. If my words can protect what you have built, I will do it. When she stood, every eye followed her. She unfolded the paper in her hands, notes she had written at dawn. When sleep refused to come, her voice was calm but firm. Mr. Hale asked me to attend the gala because he needed someone he could trust. Nothing more, but I will say this, if loyalty, kindness, and decency are now considered unprofessional, then maybe the problem is not the employee, but the system that demands perfection without humanity. The room went still. One of the younger members glanced away, uncomfortable. Whitmore frowned. That is not the statement we requested. Alexander rose from his seat. It is the statement you needed. He placed both hands on the table, his voice steady but edged with steel. This company was founded on the belief that people matter. I will not deny that she stood by me when no one else did. If that costs me your confidence, then so be it. He turned to Clara. Let us go. The two of them walked out together, their footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. Behind them, the boardroom buzzed with nervous whispers. Outside, the city stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls. Alexander stopped near the elevator, loosening his tie. His breath came slow, controlled. You should not have done that, Clara said softly. You just risked everything. He looked at her, and for the first time, he smiled without restraint. I risked everything the moment I asked you to come with me. The elevator doors opened, revealing their reflections side by side, him in a tailored suit, her in a simple blouse, both looking more defiant than defeated. Downstairs, the lobby was packed with reporters. Security tried to hold them back, but flashes erupted as soon as Alexander and Clara appeared. Mr. Hale, are you confirming the rumors? Miss Nguyen, are you in a relationship with your boss? Alexander raised a hand, silencing the noise. You want a statement? He said, his voice carrying across the marble hall. Here it is. She is not my scandal. She is the only reason I remembered who I am. For a heartbeat, the crowd froze. Then the cameras flashed again, wilder than before. He guided Clara through the doors into the street, where rain had begun to fall again, soft, cleansing, relentless. A car waited by the curb. Clara turned to him. You did not have to say that. He met her eyes, rain streaking across his collar. Yes, I did, because if I let them decide what is real, then we lose everything that truly matters. The driver opened the door, but neither moved. The city lights blurred in the rain around them, and for the first time since it all began, neither of them felt like they were pretending anymore. That night, New York did not sleep. The story of the billionaire and his assistant flooded every newsfeed, every talk show, every business channel. Clips of Alexander's bold declaration in the lobby played on repeat, his voice echoing across the nation. She is not my scandal. She is the only reason I remembered who I am. By dawn, the internet had crowned them the most talked about pair on Wall Street. Some praised him for his honesty. Others mocked him for letting emotion cloud judgment. But for Clara, it did not feel like a victory. She had not slept. Her phone kept buzzing with messages she could not bring herself to open. When she arrived at her small apartment, she placed the phone face down on the table and let silence swallow her. The world outside was roaring, but inside, it was just the sound of her own heartbeat. Hours later, a gentle knock came at her door. She hesitated before opening it. Alexander stood there, still in the same suit from the day before. The tie was gone, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his eyes shadowed but soft. You should not be here, she said quietly. I know, he replied, but I had to see you. She stepped aside, and he entered. The room was small, barely enough space for the two of them. A sketchbook lay open on the coffee table, lines of half-finished drawings scattered across the page. You draw? He asked. She shrugged. It helps me think. He nodded slowly, then looked at her with that calm intensity she had come to recognize. The board suspended me this morning, he said, pending review. They think I jeopardized the merger. Clara's heart sank. I am so sorry. Do not be, he said. I knew what would happen. What I did was not a mistake. He walked to the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. For years I have built towers, companies, and headlines, but somewhere along the way, I forgot what any of it meant. Then you walked into my office with your coffee-stained notebook and your impossible honesty. And suddenly everything made sense again. Clara felt her throat tighten. Alexander? He turned to her. You said yesterday that maybe I should not be alone. You were right. She looked down, uncertain how to respond. I did not mean to cause all this chaos. He smiled faintly. Sometimes chaos is the only way to see what is worth keeping. Silence filled the room. The rain outside softened, and a single ray of sunlight broke through the clouds. Clara finally spoke. What will you do now? Fight for the company, and for what I believe in. She hesitated. And what about me? He took a slow breath. That depends. Will you stay? Her pulse skipped. You do not need me in that world of yours. He stepped closer, close enough for her to see the exhaustion and hope tangled in his eyes. Maybe not, but I want you in my life. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. I do not know if I can handle all the attention. The rumors, the cameras. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Then let us give them something real to talk about. She stared at him, stunned. Alexander? He opened the box. Inside was not a diamond ring, but a simple silver band. It is not a proposal, he said gently. Not yet. It is a promise that when all this noise dies down, I will find you again, and if you still want me, I will ask properly. Clara blinked back tears. You really mean that? He nodded. I have never meant anything more. The city outside hummed with life again. The storm was passing. Alexander placed the ring box on the table beside her sketchbook. Keep it, he said. No contracts, no obligations, just choice. When he left, Clara stood by the window, the small box warm in her hands. She could see his black car disappear into the river of traffic below. For the first time since it all began, she smiled, not the nervous smile of an assistant trying to fit in, but the quiet smile of a woman who had finally been seen. And somewhere in the heart of New York, under the fading light of afternoon, Alexander Hale looked out from his car window and whispered to himself. One day, when the world stops watching, I will walk beside her again. The promise hung in the air, simple, fragile, and real. 2 weeks later, the city had already moved on to new headlines. The storm of gossip had quieted, replaced by stock reports and celebrity scandals. But inside Hale Tower, the silence still carried a faint echo of what had happened. Alexander returned to work under a cloud of uncertainty. The board had reinstated him temporarily, pending the final vote on the merger. His every move was being watched. Every word he spoke was measured. But behind that familiar steel composure, something had changed. He no longer worked late into the night. He no longer stayed in the penthouse after midnight, staring at the city lights like a man imprisoned by his own success. Instead, he left the office at sunset and walked through the streets, alone. But not lonely anymore. One evening, after a long meeting, he stepped out of the building and saw a small art fair being held across the street. Rows of tents lined the park, strung with tiny golden lights. Paintings, sketches, and sculptures glowed beneath the lamps. The smell of roasted coffee and rain-washed air drifted through the night. He almost kept walking, until he saw a familiar name printed on a simple white card. Clara Nguyen, Sketches of the City. Alexander froze. She was standing behind a small wooden table, wearing a gray coat and a nervous smile, arranging prints in neat rows. For a moment, he just watched her. The same woman who had once walked into his office carrying a stack of files now stood surrounded by her art, her hands trembling slightly as she greeted a customer. When she finally noticed him, her breath caught. Alexander? He smiled softly. I was just passing by. She looked flustered, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I did not expect to see you here. Neither did I, he said. But I am glad I did. For a moment, neither spoke. Around them, laughter and music filled the cool night air. Finally, she gestured toward the sketches displayed on her table. I started drawing again after everything happened. It helped me make sense of it all. He picked up one of the drawings, a black and white sketch of the Plaza Ballroom. In the center stood a man and a woman holding hands under a chandelier. The lines were simple but alive with emotion. "This one," he said quietly, "looks familiar." Clara smiled faintly. "It should. You were there." He looked at her, the city's light catching in his eyes. "You make chaos look beautiful." "I draw what I see," she said softly, "even when it hurts." He nodded slowly, understanding more in silence than words could convey. Just then, a gust of wind swept through the park, scattering a few loose sketches onto the sidewalk. Alexander bent down to help her gather them. When their hands brushed, she froze, feeling the same spark that had once startled her in the limousine. He handed her the papers, his tone gentle. "You kept your promise. You built something real." "I had to," she said. "It was the only way to move forward." He hesitated, then asked, "Do you still have the ring?" Clara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the small silver band. "I never took it off," she said quietly. Alexander's expression softened. "Good, because I came here tonight to ask if I can finally earn the right to replace it." Her breath hitched. "Are you saying?" He smiled, not with the confidence of a CEO, but with the vulnerability of a man who had learned humility. "Not here, not now, but soon, when I have proven that I am the kind of man who deserves to stand beside you. Not above you." Clara blinked back tears. "You already are, Alexander." They stood there as the crowd moved around them, two figures surrounded by lights and noise, but lost in their own quiet world. Finally, she whispered, "Do you want to see something?" He nodded. She led him to the end of the row, where a large canvas was covered by a thin sheet of cloth. With a small, nervous breath, she lifted it. The painting revealed the skyline of New York at dawn, soft golds and silvers washing over the glass towers. But at the bottom corner, two silhouettes stood hand in hand, barely visible among the colors. "It is called Starting Over," she said. Alexander stared at it for a long moment. "It is perfect," he said finally. "You are perfect." Clara laughed quietly through her tears. "You are going to make me cry in front of customers." He smiled. "Then let them see. Let the whole city see what is real." As the night deepened and the lights reflected on the wet pavement, Alexander reached for her hand. She let him. The noise of the crowd faded into the background until there was only the sound of their footsteps. Slow and steady, as they walked through the park together, two people who had faked everything once, only to find something true. Winter came early that year, dusting New York in soft white before Thanksgiving. The air carried the scent of pine, roasted chestnuts, and new beginnings. For months, the storm around Hale Industries had calmed. The merger survived, the headlines faded, and somewhere in the quiet, Alexander Hale began rebuilding, slowly, deliberately, and without apology. He had moved the company's charity branch into a new headquarters downtown, transforming an old warehouse into what he called the Hale Foundation for Integrity. Its purpose was simple: to mentor young entrepreneurs who came from nothing, the way he once had, and at his request, Clara Nguyen became its creative director. Every morning, she arrived early, greeting the volunteers with coffee and warmth. Every evening, Alexander found an excuse to linger in her office, pretending to discuss schedules or design layouts, but really just to be near her. One evening, after the last of the team had gone home, he stopped by her desk. She was sketching a poster concept for the foundation's first public event, an art and business showcase for underprivileged students. "That is beautiful," he said quietly. She looked up, smiling. "It is not finished yet." He leaned closer, studying the lines. "Neither am I." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You sound like one of the quotes we hang on the wall." "Maybe," he said, "but this one comes with context." Clara tilted her head. "And what context is that?" He hesitated for a long moment. "I have been thinking about that night at the gala," he said, "about how everything I built nearly collapsed because of pride, and how the only person who stood beside me was the one I was supposed to pretend to love." She lowered her pen, her expression softening. "You did not pretend very well." He smiled at that, the kind of quiet smile that carried gratitude more than charm. "Good, because I am done pretending." For a moment, the room was filled only with the hum of the city outside. The golden light from her desk lamp fell across his face, highlighting the faint exhaustion under his eyes. "I wanted to ask you something," he said finally. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "There is a dinner next week. The foundation's first official gala. I want you there, not as my employee, not as my date for appearances, but as the woman I am proud to walk beside. Clara blinked, caught off guard. Alexander? He stepped closer, his voice soft but steady. Last time, we walked into that ballroom pretending. This time, I want it to be real. Her eyes glistened. Are you sure? The cameras, the people. I do not care anymore. He said, they can see whatever they want. I just want them to know that you are not my assistant. You are my equal. The room grew still. Then, slowly, she nodded. Then I will go. He smiled, relief flashing across his features. Good, because I already sent the invitation, with your name on it. She laughed through her tears. You are impossible. Persistent, he corrected gently. As she gathered her sketches, he reached for her hand. The warmth between them felt both familiar and new, like the city outside, rebuilt after a storm but shining brighter for it. That night, as they left the office together, snow began to fall over the Hudson. For the first time since that fateful evening months ago, Alexander and Clara walked side by side with no pretense, no fear, and no lies, just two hearts finally moving in the same direction. The night of the Foundation's gala arrived with the kind of brilliance only New York could summon in winter. The city shimmered under falling snow, the streets alive with music and lights. Inside the newly renovated hall of the Hale Foundation for Integrity, chandeliers reflected across glass walls, casting soft gold on velvet drapes and the faces of hundreds of guests. Alexander stood near the entrance, greeting donors and partners, his usual calm demeanor grounded by something quieter, contentment. For the first time in years, he was not performing for anyone. Every conversation, every smile, felt genuine, yet his eyes kept drifting to the staircase. Then she appeared. Clara descended the steps in a gown the color of soft ivory. Her hair gathered elegantly, her presence so radiant that the entire room seemed to pause. Conversations faded, cameras clicked. For one long heartbeat, all Alexander could do was breathe. She reached the last step, her eyes meeting his. I made it, she said, her voice light, nervous. You did more than that, he replied, you just stopped time. Her cheeks flushed. Please do not say things like that in front of reporters. Let them hear, he said simply. Let them know it is real this time. He offered his arm, and she took it. Together, they walked through the crowd. People turned, whispering again, but the tone was different now. Respectful, curious, even admiring. The same voices that once mocked now softened, recognizing something genuine in the way he looked at her. As the evening unfolded, the focus shifted from their story to the cause they had built. Students presented art, young innovators shared their projects, and Alexander introduced each with pride. When it was Clara's turn to speak, she stepped onto the stage, the spotlight soft against her face. Months ago, she began, I stood beside Mr. Hale at another gala, a night when people judged without knowing the truth. Tonight, I stand here proud, not because of what we have built, but because of who we have become. This foundation is not about wealth. It is about giving people a chance to start again. Her words were met with applause, genuine and warm. Alexander watched from below, his chest tightening with admiration. Afterward, as the orchestra began to play, Clara found him near the balcony overlooking the city. Snow fell beyond the glass, blanketing the skyline in silver. That was perfect, he said softly. She smiled. So was your speech. You actually smiled more than twice. He chuckled. It was easier with you there. They stood side by side, watching the snow drift down onto the streets. The world outside seemed impossibly quiet. Do you ever think, she asked gently, about how strange it all was? The lies, the contracts, the pretending? I think about it every day, he said, because it reminds me that the truth we found came from it. Clara turned to face him, her eyes glistening in the light. So, what happens now? Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out the small silver band she had kept all this time. He held it between his fingers, the reflection of the city glinting across the metal. Now, he said, we make it real. He slipped the ring back onto her hand. No spotlight, no stage, no audience, just them. Clara whispered, it already was. And when he leaned forward to kiss her, it was not dramatic or rehearsed. It was simple, quiet, and utterly sincere, the kind of moment no photograph could ever capture. But everyone in that room somehow felt. Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing every trace of what came before and covering the city with something new. A year later, the city welcomed spring again. The last traces of winter melted into warm sunlight that spilled over the Hudson and turned the glass towers of Manhattan into rivers of gold. Inside the Hale Foundation for Integrity, the lobby buzzed with quiet energy. A new exhibit had just opened, 1 Year of Hope, a collection of projects funded through the foundation's mentorship program. Paintings, inventions, and photographs filled the space, each piece carrying a story of someone who had been given a second chance. At the center of the exhibit stood a framed photo. It showed a man and a woman walking through a rain-soaked street. Hand in hand, the caption read, "Kindness builds empires that money never can." Alexander stood nearby, greeting guests, no longer the cold, distant CEO the city once knew. His posture was relaxed, his smile unforced. Every now and then, he looked toward the entrance, as if waiting for someone. Then she arrived. Clara stepped through the glass doors, sunlight catching the edge of her blue dress. She carried a sketchbook under one arm and wore the same silver band that had once been only a promise. Alexander walked toward her, the crowd parting as if guided by instinct. "You are late," he teased. "I was working," she said, smiling. "Someone has to design the posters for your next event." He laughed softly. "I should have known." For a moment, they just stood there, surrounded by the hum of conversation and the warmth of the afternoon light. "Do you remember the first gala?" she asked. "How could I forget?" he said. "That night changed everything." Clara glanced at the photo display, her eyes softening. "You once said you wanted to walk beside me when the world stopped watching." "I think it has." He nodded, his gaze gentle. "And I plan to keep walking. Wherever you go." She reached out, straightening his tie, a gesture both simple and intimate. "Good," she said, "because I am not going anywhere." They moved together toward the large windows overlooking the city. Outside, the skyline stretched endlessly, reflecting everything they had endured and everything still to come. The applause of a nearby crowd faded into the distance as Alexander slipped his arm around her shoulders. For the first time, he was not leading and she was not following, they were simply walking side by side. As the camera lights dimmed and the chatter dissolved into music, the story that had once been a scandal became something far greater, a testament to grace, courage, and the quiet power of choosing love over pride. In a city built on ambition, they had found something rare, peace. And for Alexander Hale and Clara Nguyen, that was the truest success of all.